Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the United States Institute of Peace. My name is Michael Yaffe. I'm the Vice President for the Middle East North Africa Center here at the Institute. And we'd like to welcome you all to this very, very special panel discussion with a distinguished delegation from Libya. We're here to talk about what is happening in Libya, and particularly efforts for reunification within the country. USIP has been working in Libya since 2011 and is very proud to be able to help support the efforts that are being undertaken in Libya. And with our excellent team, they have been working very closely with the National Planning Council. But I would like to underscore at the very, very beginning, what is happening within the Council is a Libyan effort by Libyans who are devoted to the improvement of Libya. And all the products that come out are their own. And we're very fortunate to have this panel here today to discuss their work, where they are advancing, and what they've been able to achieve so far. The Institute is very glad to be supportive of the efforts for national reconciliation and national reunification, an important part of bringing the country together in order to have more a prosperous future. So what I'm going to do is basically introduce our three panel guests, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tom Hill, our Senior Program Officer here at the Institute, who will then moderate the discussion. Just be aware this discussion is being recorded. It is not being live streamed, though, but it is being recorded for future posting. So let me begin by introducing our three distinguished delegates. I'll begin with Abdullah al-Lafi, who is the current Deputy Head of the Presidential Council, a position he has held since 2021. He is a prominent figure in Libyan politics and has played a key role in the country's ongoing efforts towards stability and reconciliation. In 2014, Mr. al-Lafi was elected to the Libyan House of Representatives, where he has served as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He has also served as a member of the Libyan Delegation to the United Nations, and in 2021, Mr. al-Lafi was appointed as Deputy Head of the Presidential Council of Libya, where he was assigned the responsibility of leading the national reconciliation efforts, and he presides over Libya's National Reconciliation Committee. Mr. Aymen Seifennaser is a representative to the House of Representatives. He is originally from Warshanafa, a region located south of Tripoli, which is known to be a stronghold for anti-Gaddafi forces. He played a key role in the negotiations of the Libyan political agreement that was signed in 2015, and the appointment of Fayez al-Sarraj as the Prime Minister of the internationally recognized Government of National Accord between 2016 and 2021. During this time, he has served as a senior advisor and speechwriter for the Prime Minister, and he has acted as the GMPA's Prime Minister's special envoy to Ankara and to Cairo, supporting mediation efforts at the regional level. And finally, our third speaker is Mr. Muftah Nasib, who is the chair of Libya's National Planning Council, and which was formerly known as the General Planning Council, that was established back in the 1950s, which was a government body in Libya responsible for development and implementation of the country's national economic development plans and policies. MPC was established by the National Transition Council in 2011 to provide economic and political guidance to the government and the House of Representatives. And under Libyan laws, the Council is responsible for establishing and planning economic and social priorities and the oversight of the implementation of the national development plans. On the MPC, he has led as chairman. He was appointed by the Prime Minister and its members, and including representatives from all ministries, government agencies, private sector organizations, and civil society groups. So with that, what I want to do now is to turn the proceedings over to Tom Hill and to further with the discussion with our welcome guests. So again, gentlemen, welcome to Washington, and thank you for coming to the U.S. Institute of Peace.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. And thank you all for coming. It's a great honor to have such a high-level delegation visit us here at USIP, and they're spending a couple days in Washington, and we're very privileged to be supporting that visit. So today is their first day and first event. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us. There's a lot going on in Libya these days. As you know, we've had quite a few delegations come through Washington lately, and so Libya is on people's mind. So I want to jump straight in, and the format that we'll cover is I'll ask you all questions, and then we'll move into a Q&A with the audience for the second half of this event. So I want to start with you, Deputy al-Lafi. We had the special representative of the Secretary General, Abdullah Bathili, in town approximately 2 weeks ago, right before he went to New York and announced a new initiative to lead to elections later this year, both legislative and presidential. I'm sure you've been aware of what he was going to say and then what he said. And so what has been your reaction to his new initiative, and what do you think are the prospects for elections later this year?
شكرا بسم الله بداية صباح النور جميعا.
Thank you and good morning all. I'm very happy to be here and participate with you in trying to do a prognosis of the situation in Libya. And as a presidential council, we are eager to hold the elections in Libya, and this is a demand by the Libyan people. There are 2 million voters in Libya who want to see situation go back to normal in Libya. And we in the Presidential Council have supported the initiative of Abdullah Bathili, the UN representative. And we believe that his initiative is a very good initiative and has a good approach to resolving the crisis in Libya after the two councils of the House of Representatives and High Council of State have failed to arrange for the elections. And Abdullah Bathili Haliyan says that there must be a new course if the two councils fail to find a solution. And the UN mission, support mission in Libya, and the international community have realized that there have been several changes for the parliament in Libya to reach reconciliation, but unfortunately it was only recently that the House of Representatives has introduced a constitutional amendment. But this amendment has some flaws. One is that it did not include a clear roadmap to hold the elections. And this is the most crucial thing in the constitutional base. And also that we do not have the qualifications for candidates. And this is an issue of great debate and must be addressed. So the initiative of Abdullah Bathili, the UN representative, is very important, and we in the Presidential Council support this vision and this initiative, and we are currently working closely with the UN envoy to form a mechanism to succeed in holding the elections.
We're honored to have members of the National Planning Council as part of the delegation. And for those in Washington who may not be familiar with the National Planning Council's work and the function of the NPC, could you tell us a little bit about what you're working on these days? Mr. Nasib, what comes next for the NPC after your great success with the Audit Bureau? Please enlighten Washington about the work of the NPC, if you could.
Bismillah.
I would like to correct some of the information that you mentioned. The National Council is 70-year-old institute, and when It was established, it was in cooperation with the USAIG, and it is a sovereign institute, and it is appointed, the head is appointed by the parliament. Our main mission is to prepare the plans, short-term and long-term plans for development, especially that the council has among its members the full cabinet and the representatives of the think tanks and the banks and the oil company and the oil institution. In the year 2018, there was an effort by this council to unify Libyan institutions in cooperation with the UNGP and the Peace Institute in the United States. We are carrying out a lot of efforts, but these efforts may be small, but they are fruitful, and they move us toward national reconciliation. We are trying to unify the national institutions, and we have achieved many steps in this regard, especially in the accounting department and civil society groups and airlines. There are about 30 institutions that are now operative. Thanks to the efforts of I particularly thank the U.S. Peace Institute for its efforts. As for national reconciliation in Libya, I believe that this issue and the role of the Planning Council was crucial in boosting this effort through Libyan experts who have prepared the vision for this endeavor, and we have received immense help from the president of the Presidential Council, Mohammed al-Manfi, and in cooperation with the USIP, we did train many experts for designing a model that would suit the preparatory conference. And we are also preparing for a comprehensive conference on several tracks of reconciliation. And we have benefited from the experts that the Peace Council, the Peace Institute has trained. And we are planning to stay on this track. And thank you.
I want to return to the SRSG Bathili's comments, and I think Deputy al-Lafi alluded to this about this push for elections when there are so many other big questions still to be resolved. And so I wonder, from your perspective, do you feel like there's too much emphasis being placed on the need for elections right now? Should we be talking about other things like constitutional questions, demobilization and of militias, economic reforms? Is that where the conversation should be, or should we be as focused on elections as the SRSG would like us to be?
Thank you very much. Important questions, but I will speak in Arabic just to keep Mr. al-Lafi and Dr. Muftah with us.
I will speak in Arabic. When Batili, the UN envoy, presented his briefing to the UN Security Council, he did provide proposals for solutions, but he did not go into details. And there is actually a certain merit in not mentioning all the details, because that would entice the councils in Libya to look into the amendment, especially the 13th amendment of the Constitution. There is a certain expertise among Libyan partners who are always, the Libyans are always worried about plans that you do not know in detail. I know that the plan of Mr. Batili lacks a lot of things that he might be thinking of, but he did not want to present because he's leaving that perhaps to the Libyans to delineate. For example, 2 days ago, he said that he will give the House of Representatives and the High Council of State a chance until June to decide on these issues. I believe that what these two councils have done so far is the maximum that they could achieve. And when Mr. Bachili speaks about the conditions for the candidates to run the elections, the two councils couldn't come up with decision on rejecting dual nationals, for example. And even when we had the committee 6+6, they couldn't reach a decision on such decisions because they are under pressures from internal pressure that are very strong. These two councils are a result of the political process. They are not leaders of the political process, and they have to think outside the box. And we discussed this matter with Abdullah Bachili, and the question is, can we can fixing the constitution help us hold the elections? No, there has to be other steps to be taken, whether by the House of Representatives or the House or the State Council. There are issues that in Libya that make some people think it's a zero-sum game. There are some groups in Libya that reject completely other groups. So there are measures that must be taken to bring together the combatants or the rival parties to agree. There has to be some negotiations to turn these rival parties and turn the equation from a zero-sum game to a win-win game. Therefore, there has to be a real initiative by a party that is not part of that is not allied with one group in Libya. And we believe that the Presidential Council is the most neutral institution because it is not part of the political conflict and can come up with this initiative. The idea that started with the elections, there is also the economic side and the militias. We have to give guarantees to those who are part of the armed groups because they will not agree to a process that would bring about a president who would throw them in jail or or take their weapons away, and then they would lose their achievements. Everyone is afraid that one of the political groups would take power and start a course of vengeance against other groups. And that's a critical matter. So there has to be an initiative that is clear and would, through the efforts of Abdullah Basili, help us move forward. When we want to discuss the restoration of trust among the various parties, this is the main issue. This is the issue that we did not discuss it in the past. In the meeting of Khairat, we could have produced a government, but what would have been impossible is to produce national reconciliation. There is no agreement. This is the country where we couldn't even discuss the constitution, although the constitution have dealt with a lot of issues. But the world doesn't know what is the constitution because there is no real debate about the constitution. The constitutive issues are not discussed in Libya. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but we need to discuss several topics. The division of wealth is one topic. The matter of the armed groups and how to take them out of the conflict is another issue. And also, we need to find a way of a political game that would help everyone, and that would eliminate the fear that some groups the losers will be excluded from the political future of Libya. So these are the issues that we must need to add to the plan of Batili.
And I would like to say something after the arrangement to USIP that we think to have helped us in the national reconciliation, that I would like to talk in isolation from this event, from this question. I mean, independently from this question, it is that regarding these issues that we are talking about really need more discussion and also solutions. The good thing is that the project for national reconciliation is written, and this is a first. It is written by Libyan hands, and it was planned inside Libya, and the first phase of it was done inside Libya, but it is a long-term project for the political process that will lead us to elections. It needs that this project be added so that the political process is accomplished. There also should be a short-term line, which is the incentives and guarantees. I would like to stop here to leave space for discussion.
Drill down on the issues that divide Libyans internally, but I think we'd be remiss not to talk about the role of external actors.
Yes.
And as we saw in the past, we saw again with SRSG Bathili's comments that the main external parties once again pledged their support to UNSMIL. They pledged their support to the United Nations. We've seen that rhetoric before. This is not new. We've consistently seen pledges of support, but the actions would tell a different story frequently. There's support for armed groups. There's money going to groups that are working against democracy within the country. And so there's a disconnect between the rhetoric of some of these external actors and their actions on the ground. So how do you envision, Deputy al-Lafi, this new initiative, this new process moving forward, or is it doomed to run into the same challenges as previous ones, with external actors continuing to support proxies, continuing to support groups that advance their own interests that may not be the same as the interests of the Libyan people? Or do you have some insight or some confidence that Bathili is able to convince external actors to put aside those interests and actually put their money where their mouth is, and actually work through the UN rather than working against or to undermine the UN?
نعم سؤال
Yes, it's a very important question. Before delving into the issue of external support, we have to focus on an important point, which is the issue of regaining trust amongst the Libyans. The trust is lacking between the competing actors. Foreign countries also are involved. We know that the political problem in Libya since 2011, after the Libyans changed the regime and the revolution succeeded, elections took place during the national conference. There were excellent elections which succeeded a lot. The first time the Libyan people elected in the national elections. After that, the state continued to be stable until 2014. In 2014, the parliamentary elections, unfortunately, this is where the problem started in Libya, and some external factors used it. Skhirat dialogue started, resulted in a government, a council also with the government. The parties agreed for the elections to succeed. The Libyans agreed to have an executive branch, but unfortunately the elections did not succeed. After that, divisions led to a government in the east and another in the west. Unfortunately, the crisis caused to a war in 2019. After that, a new dialogue started, which called Libyans. A ceasefire happened. Thank God this was accomplished, because the world worked to make that achieve. A new political dialogue also started, the results of which led to an executive branch and also a presidential council and an independent government. The Libyan people wanted the elections, but there were concerned external parties. They were afraid that the party they support would not succeed. So regaining the trust between the Libyan parties is important. Unfortunately, the Libyans asked on 24/8 asked for elections, but that did not happen. Why? Because there is an issue that is important, which is to regain the trust between the parties. This is what we have worked for as a Prudential Council. We have to work to regain the trust. This was a very important point for us to launch towards communicating with all the parties. We started with the supporters of the former regime. I belong to February. From the beginning, I was a supporter of the February movement and those that called for the February 17 revolution. But my goal was to regain the trust in the state and stability and security and the success of all the parties working together. So there is lots of political divisions. So an important element is to regain trust. We need to communicate about the members of the former regime. We succeeded initially. We started to focus on the national reconciliation project, in which we have to focus on the points of disagreements between the Libyans. We need to discuss them. So we started where those before us stopped by putting in place a reconciliation plan of 33 issues of disagreement. They are important and need to be discussed. So they are important with varying degrees. Some issues are old and are renewed, and there are new issues also. So we have to sit down. Libyans, all of us, we have to sit down to have a dialogue with all the political parties. We succeeded, thank God, to launch the strategic vision for the National Reconciliation Project, which included 5 important points. It was very important, like Aymen said. He mentioned some issues like the national identity, justice, national security, decentralization, local authority. These issues have to be discussed because we cannot achieve stability and the success of the political process unless we discuss these issues so that we succeed. From here, like I said, we have to focus on regaining the trust between the political parties so that we can assure that there is no interference in the internal Libyan issues by external factors. Also, we focused on the success of the political process and the elections. We have to go on 2 tracks, a long-term one and the other one a short-term track, which supports the projects of elections and the demands of the Libyans. The other one is one that will bring together all the political parties on the ground and all the competing factors for power so that the national reconciliation succeeds. The short term is to call the competing parties that compete for power to come together, the ones that are getting involved in the elections. So we should put in place a framework so that we reject zero participation. We want everybody to participate in this election so that it succeeds. We know very well that elections involve losing parties and winning parties. In Libya, we have a real problem. We have a real crisis in Libya. The trust between the parties is the issue. We have to regain the trust. Some parties are concerned. Unfortunately, a lot of people did not know this. We should treat this. If all the parties are involved in the political process and that everybody feels that they are given a chance to succeed here, we can be sure that the elections will succeed. We focus on the necessity for the election project to succeed, and what Mr. Batili is leading his efforts, despite lack of clarity in his project. But I think at this time, in particular, as a presidential council, we met Mr. Batili. We talked to him about this, and we see solutions. But the solutions need more clarification. We do have ideas as a presidential council, and which we clarify to Mr. Batili. Upon them, we can build so that we can come out of the political crisis.
Questions. There are microphones in the room. If you identify yourself, one of the microphones will be brought to you. Thanks. So, questions? Issa, thanks. It's for the recording as well.
Issam Omesh, the president of the Libyan American Alliance. Welcome to the delegation. Marhaban bikum. I can ask it in both languages, guys. My question is focused on discussing with Mr. Batili, the special envoy, the issue of choosing this high council or the high committee of the 40. مسألة اختيار أعضاء لجنة الأربعين. لأنه أعتقد إنه مناط بها.
Because I believe to it is our entrusted responsibilities and challenges as well. So how choosing, how can it happen
of the people who will be on the committee will be very crucial. And I think his announcement initially when he mentioned political institutions and political figures, but he also mentioned tribal leaders, and that created a stir in Libya because, again, the tribal structure in Libya is more of a social cohesion structure. It is not one that yields, necessarily political power. And اختيار مسؤولي يعني موضوع اختيار رجال القبائل وغيرها يعني أيضا يشكل إشكال. This is the question, and just a quick comment, which is regarding يعني المعادلة الصفرية في ليبيا للأسف.
The zero rate comes from the inability to avoid by the parties on the ground, whether the ones that have projects or others, they did not achieve the bases for the civil state. So we have to make sure that we face this challenge before we delve into civil other things. So there have to be priorities on the basis of the demands that are the assurances that are given to foreign actors.
It's not to progress, which is the different conflicting projects with the civic state project. And I think the internationals have a very important role in sidelining those who are pushing for a project other than the civil state. And then whatever agreement that happens to settle that issue becomes paramount. Thank you. So the question is what I need an answer for. I don't need the comment on the comment.
Thank you, Issam. And أعتقد عصام
I think Issam has focused on an important thing, which is the criteria that Batili will choose the committee of the 40. Mr. Ali mentioned it's 45, 15 from the House of Representatives and 15 from the state and 15 independents, but it appears that there's a misunderstanding between the parties. Is this a real number or quota? The former experience gives us an impression about what is going to happen. We have said that any parties that represent the Libyan people can meet. the House of Representatives can give them confidence, as what happened by the government, and the House of Representatives failed to give a trust to Sarraj. But the agreement to formulate the political process is impossible. Who can you choose in Libya? Who will put a constitutional frame? They failed in Geneva, even though this was priority number one, even though they were away from pressures. More than half of them are not from the HOR or the state. So there is a problem. If we use the same means of the solution, that failed once, that failed more than once, then we are not looking for a solution. Mr. Tahir Sunni mentioned in a speech before the Security Council that we should not use the solutions that have not worked. And this is real. If we are looking for a second phase, then we should prepare for, if we do that, then we are looking for a new era of conflict. So, but involving everybody positively in the political process or in the elections without showing concern, fear from the winning party, if we open this door to this model, I think that everything will follow. I remember that when Khirat Phase 1 ended, there were issues. There was no agreement between the three regions. But when we put forth solution number 9, everybody competed, and we went to Khirat. The number of representatives who went to Khirat were 91, of course, without including the National Conference. It succeeded, and it was adopted. First, on the 17th, it was the meeting in Khirat was rejected. And then Ali Qahtani, the commander of the army, was nominated. After that, areas in Tobruk and Benghazi came out in demonstrations that supported the new presidential council. That was rejected initially. The answer is that they should all feel that they are participating. This is the beginning. But it was not, the framework was not written that would give these assurances or incentives. So the main competitors have to agree on the assurances before we get involved into the political process. We can talk about legislative or founding ideas in order to frame the whole thing. We need to frame the whole thing, and then we get into the political process that will lead to elections. From our experience, we found that incentives and the guarantees are the ones that make the political process work. Unfortunately, this is the reality. But in order for us to come out of the crisis in which we are, and the state of the divisions and the international interventions and the military presence on the ground, so that we regain the sovereignty of Libya, or so that Libya can play at least a real role instead of its decisions being made abroad. This requires the presence of an elected presence who has legitimacy, who can run the country. In order to, but there is a big vulnerability, which is that of trust. We call it the vulnerability of trust. It's the only way to express this. There is no trust between the competitors. They will not get involved in. They will imperil it. We need to overcome this vulnerability through trust. There cannot be a comprehensive solution, but at least we can learn from the experiences. We have too, the Khirat experience and the Geneva experience, but no solution was found. They lasted only for 2 years, and then a conflict started again. Having an elected president with legitimacy will give a greater opportunity so that stability is regained, so that he resolves the division in the military institutions, so that the political decision and the sovereign decision regarding foreign interference, so that he can solve it. If we manage to achieve this year, in the next 4 years, there will be an opportunity to find solutions for other problems. But we cannot put all the problems all together and solve them all at once. We can look at a problem that will get the agreements of all parties, and then we move on to another problem, and so on and so forth.
My name is Khalil Anan. I'm a senior fellow at the Arab Center, Washington, D.C. I'm going to ask in Arabic, out of respect to our delegation. أهلا وسهلا في Washington.
I welcome in Washington. I have two questions, one to Aymen and the other to Lafi. You mentioned assurances and incentives. What do you mean by that, Mr. Aymen? You spoke about assurances and guarantees and incentives to convince the competitors. Can you explain that more? What do you mean by these guarantees and incentives? Can you give examples, Dr. Lafi? You spoke about the foreign factors influencing the process internally. Is it possible for the presidential council, such as Aymen said, to lead a dialogue that's between the Libyans themselves, and at the same time it can have an influence on foreign factors or actors? Is it possible for the council to do this? First, Abdullah is the one who came with the basic idea when it comes to assurances or guarantees and incentives. Initially, we were not convinced of the idea, but as a political team working with Mr. Abdullah, we started to formulate this idea. The initiative he developed, but he came up with, but it needs to become more mature. This needs a new tour of discussions so that it can be fully put forth. The idea of who makes the loser or the one who is afraid of losing impede elections. So there are, of course, external factors and internal factors. Why the state, for example, is worried about elections? It fears that the person who comes to power will not achieve the goals, but everybody knows that elections will come. We do not want to be in a crisis that will cause us Libyans another war and battles and disturbances before the election process. Before the elections. That's why Mr. Abdullah said, why don't we involve everybody on a table so that we that takes into account guarantees, assurances, and incentives. The incentives is that everybody winning or losing, of course, we need more details about this. They need to be involved in the government that will be established after the elections. We can decide the percentages. For example, 10% of the elections will give their votes. The voters have to have a representation of the government, even though they come out as losing in the first round. There is need to have guarantees that the person is not prosecuted during the reign of the elected official. He should have immunity so that no future crisis takes place, such as him rejecting, the new elections. So, for example, imagine a losing party has 35% of the voters. He can, through this percentage, and those that voted for him, he can push them to refuse the elections, and this will lead to a crisis. Or he may be patient, and then he may cause a crisis later on. For example, the vice president of the government, he can give an opportunity to nominate some members in the government. I think that from the perception or the Libyan way of understanding participation is the nomination of ministers. There are things that we cannot talk about now, but they can be made more mature, and then we can put them as a full initiative. So this involves not only those that get incentives. There are also combatants on the field. We should not criminalize this or that. The ones who were fighting for Tripolis, they were heroes. And then when that is over, we call them militias, and everybody punishes them. So these are Libyan youths who lost a lot of opportunities. Some of them think that the domain of freedom, despite the largeness of the country, we have to respect that they like the reality better than the return of the dictatorship. They say that give me a dictator, but I want to be in peace. So those who carried weapons need to be given assurances that when there is a president of the state, that they are not going to be stripped of the return to defend their rights for freedom. That they will have an income so that they can get a job. That there is an opportunity for them in the economic project in the future. You have to give them some incentives and assurances. They also worry that the next president will put them in jail as soon as he comes to power. There has to be legislations that protect those youths that will be wood for wars after elections, so that we want them to come out of the conflict, and we want them to be protected. This initiative should also involve the project of national reconciliation that talks about decentralization, the distribution of wealth, and effective management of the resources. So we need a civil discussion. Like Mr. Abdullah said, there are issues that need to be solved now, and there are others that need we need to start the conversation about. I don't know if I have answered, but Mr. Abdullah may explain more.
Certainly, as a political issue, we have to seek a certain entity that could bring all the Libyans together. So the current presence of the Presidential Council and making this council the main player in bringing together the Libyans. I can tell you that the Libyan Presidential Council has been able for the past 2 years of keeping itself above the foray, and has restored some trust of various parties in Libya, because it is capable of bringing the Libyans into an initiative. For example, I talked to everyone, and I have met the House of Representatives Speaker Abdullah Saleh in Istanbul. I also met with Khalid al-Mishri of the High Council of State in Tripoli. I also talked to the el-Menefi of the General Military Command, who was in Benghazi a few weeks ago, and he met with Aqila Saleh and General Haftar. I also met Fathi Bashagha, the Prime Minister of the government of national stability. I'm trying to find a solution that would incorporate and bring together everyone into the political process. And as I said, restore confidence among the Libyans and confidence in themselves that they can find a solution away from foreign intervention. And I appreciate the fact that some countries interfere in Libyan affairs in order to try to exclude some people because they do not serve their interests. But when everyone takes part, that will give more confidence to everyone. And that's a role that the Presidential Council is playing at this critical stage. And we are doing our best, and we will keep doing our best in the near future to bring together all the political players and have them engage in discussion and find solutions and results. As for the guarantees, I want to affirm that everyone has to take part. Everyone should feel that they are part. That they are winning, because we are in Libya, and unfortunately Libya is a special case. If you look at the political process in Libya as of 12/11 till now, the violations that happened, let me talk to you openly. In eastern Libya, the presence of General Haftar, can we exclude Haftar from the political process? It's very difficult. So he has to be part of it. So when there are forces on the ground, we have to restore the trust of those who are running the country. that they will not be thrown into jail or excluded. There is also a need for transitional justice in order to help everyone to participate, and the criminals must not be able to get away with the human crimes and crimes against the Libyan people.
زينب ربوع from the Hudson Institute. سأتكلم باللغة العربية. فشكرا لكم لحضوركم.
Thank you for being here. I would like to know about your opinion about Russian intervention in the region. You have talked about military intervention by some countries. How do you see the Russian involvement and the political processes that you mentioned? What is your opinion about the Russians and the way they see the situation? Unfortunately, the situation in Libya has allowed mercenaries and foreigner fighters in Libya. And one of the reasons for the continued crisis, even if we talk about the elections, we have to make sure that the mercenaries and foreign fighters and foreign forces would leave the country. There is no doubt that the Russians have forces in Libya. And we in the Presidential Council and through the United Nations mission have made it clear that we need to have a mechanism to deal with this file, with this issue, and exit of foreign forces and the mercenaries from Libya. And there has been a project supported by the Presidential Council, even from the time when Ms. Stephanie was working as special UN envoy. We have talked with various capitals in the region, and we created a mechanism for starting the exit of foreign forces and mercenaries from the countries. But unfortunately, about a year ago, we ignored this issue after and we're trying to revive it now with Abdullah Bachili, and there has been meetings in Tripoli and in Sirte, and 2 meetings in Cairo. And that was for the first time that we had neighboring countries participate in these meetings, and they are all these neighboring countries support the stability of Libya, and they are in agreement about starting to withdraw foreign forces from Libya. And we in the Presidential Councils are eager to see the exit of all types of foreign forces from Libya, because the elections must be based on having an elected president in Libya, even if there are problems in Libya. But in order for this president to be legitimate, and when he has the support of the international community, he would guarantee the exit of these forces from Libya.
Seifennaser, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to express my extreme gratitude on behalf of the U.S. Institute of Peace for joining us today. And also I'd like to thank our audience for coming and partaking in this discussion. If you'll join me in thanking our panel. As a reminder, there is a reception to follow immediately outside these doors. I hope you will stay, engage with our panelists, engage with each other. Please partake in the food and drink. Thank you so much again for coming.